We are,
That's okay.
we are getting going.
Did I mention Michelle?
Well,
That's my gavel.
you're it got long, and then I left it long, and then I was like,
Can you just give me a heads up when we know who's in the meeting?
he's in. Nope.
Great. And do we know that he can hear us before I start? Mr. Cruz, just want to make sure you can hear us. And then we've got,
Yes, I can hear.
okay, great. Thank you very much. All right. This special meeting of the Board of Education for September 6, 2022 is called to order. Welcome, Mr. Cruz. The purpose of tonight's meeting is to consider complaint number 2022-04. In accordance with board policy 4.50.032P, the district follows certain procedures for resolution of formal complaints by students, parents or guardians, and people who reside in the district in order to resolve formal complaints in a fair and timely manner. If during this meeting issues pertaining to confidential student records arise, we will need to move into executive session after first addressing in a public meeting the components of the complaint that do not pertain to confidential student records. If that happens following the executive session, we will return to a public meeting to vote on your complaint. I don't think that's going to be an issue here today, but just in case. Mr. Cruz, you will have 5 minutes to provide your comments tonight. Following your comments, board members may follow up with questions for you and or for staff. Mr. Cruz, are you ready and would you like to begin?
Sure. It's not going to be long. It's pretty simple, short and simple. Yeah, Karanja Cruz for the record. If you take a look at your notes and the information about the complaint, in the section where it says the board decision, it says affirm or reverse step 2 of the findings. So basically all I'm asking is if you could do a further investigation. So if you look at item number 1, it says did not have a site council and there is a corrective action plan in place. My only concern with that is I've been asking for a site council since September of 2021. At the time, the administration had stated that they're going to start that process in November. So here we are in August of 2022, and we still have an action plan in place. And then if you look at number 2, did not conduct a regular self-assessment, et cetera. There's no evidence of that taking place. Also, if you look, it states that the state testing was suspended in 2020 and 2021. I'm actually was looking for the information for 2021-2022 school year going into the 2022 and 23 school year. If you look at item number 3, it says did a family meeting for March 10th. As a parent at the school, that did not take place. I didn't receive any notification regarding that meeting. I asked for information like the correspondence that went out for that meeting, and I was told to do a public request. The public request is backlogged, as you know. I think they're probably about 3 or 4 months out. So I just was kind of confused on that, why I had to do a public request if that was a meeting that took place. So definitely need more investigation for the March 10th. And then if you look at number 4, it said did a draft for the CIP plan. I had asked for that CIP plan, I believe in March. If you look at the document now, it looks like it's been well polished. So I don't know if it's been worked on over the course of the few months that I've been asking for it. So that's my comments.
Great. Thank you. Superintendent, do you have staff who would like to walk through any of the findings so far in the 2 stages we've gone through?
Sure. I think the last correspondence you got on the step 2 was from Dr. We do have our deputy and our chief of schools and assistant superintendent Calvert here as well. Do you want to read that off first?
Yeah, I'll just say that we've walked through the process with Dr. Calvert. Then step 2 again was with Dr. O. So we're gonna get a doctor.
I know.
And
I'm gonna stay in the room with you. I get doctors.
and in walking through and reviewing the process with the team, have agreed with the findings, right? That we observed the occurrence as it was at Harriet Tubman Middle School last year. And then I'll turn it over to Dr. Ms. Calvert for comments. Needs to get working on that,
I
Doctor.
know. Yes.
Intent.
That's right, it's intent. So there are a couple things, and I just wanted to thank Mr. Cruz for surfacing the concerns and really thinking about how to engage our families in an ongoing improvement process. What we found and in reviewing the materials and looking back is that a site council was not in place, and that the spaces for there to be family involvement and input into the school improvement planning was an area that needed to be addressed and improved upon. So one of the pieces that we did last spring was to, well, it actually started in the fall. So Mr. Cruz we did, there was an initial outreach to try to establish a site council in the fall of 2021. It did not come to fruition, and we set another, we solicited nominations again in the spring while we were still looking for a principal. I met with the team this morning, and we have a list of nominees that we will bring forward to the community, and that includes nominees from the staff as well. And so we're in the process of going through and saying, okay, this is how we get a site council seated. And the goal is to share those nominations next week at back to school night, so that there can be a vote and then we can get a site council seated as quickly as possible in the coming school year. So that's one of the direct pieces of kind of process involved that we've done with as a result of this ongoing conversation with Mr. Cruz. And the goal then is to go back through with the site council to look at the other pieces of concern that were surfaced that included what is the plan for family engagement? How can families provide input and understanding into the school improvement plan, along with as a Title I school, Harriet Tubman Middle School should have what is called a family, community, and student compact. So how can there be input on the family engagement plan? That compact would be some of the work that would happen initially with the site council. So that is the general plan moving forward and looking at where the pieces are. Mr. Cruz did provide some names of people that were interested in participating. We also have the nominations. So we're circling back to both the list that Mr. Cruz provided and the families that responded to the form to see if they're still interested, so that we can do that ballot in the coming week. I think the other pieces that the part around how is information being communicated with families, I think is really a critical piece. And where are the spaces and places to do that? What we're doing as we go forward is we walk through what are the pieces for Title I compliance, what are the timelines for Title I compliance, and how are we going to document who was present for those meetings, which is a point that Mr. Cruz has surfaced, as well as who's been present and how are we doing that, which is an area that we need to improve upon in the coming.
And just to add on that, as a result of Mr. Cruz asking the questions that he has asked regarding Tubman, it led me in working with the team to ask the same questions about what's happening with other and all schools. So we are taking measures this year to put supports in place for principals and students around the process of ensuring that we have a functioning, appropriate, aligned site council that will engage deeply in the school with the leader and with the parents and staff and students in the work of school improvement and also, making sure that we're following up on all other Title I requirements.
Great.
So it just causes us to want to tighten up our practices a little bit.
Okay. Thank you. I'm going to want to open it up to the board, but if folks don't mind, if I ask sort of an overarching question of Mr. Cruz, having read through your complaint, and I think you know this because I think you cited it, the board's role at this stage of the process is either to sustain the findings so far, or to reverse those findings and provide some additional direction to the superintendent in terms of what we can do. You've noted in some of your materials and tonight, you want the board to undertake an additional investigation, which I think the board doesn't actually investigate. So I guess I want to hear a little bit more, because when I read through the complaint, I mean, first of all, on the first one about a site council, it's sustained. So essentially the district is saying, you're right, we didn't have one, and here's our plan to have one. And on the others, what I read is the district saying, well, we actually, these things are in progress. And there were some concrete plans that I saw, in finding number 2. Plans to put structures and supports in place under a new principal to help mitigate some of those issues. Under item number 3, specifically, Mr. Tibbs working with the new leader at Tubman to create a parent advisory group that's going to work in collaboration with the leaders to improve performance and school culture. In number 4, the idea of a school improvement plan for Harriet Tubman Middle School, having been developed. I guess I'd be curious, what is the action you're asking the board to take today, and why, in terms of the plans that the district has set are in place, do you not feel that those are sufficiently responsive to your complaints?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So basically, in a nutshell, what I'm asking the board to do is, as you stated, thank you for clarifying that you guys don't do the investigations, but you actually give a directive, right, to the superintendent. Is that correct?
Correct.
All right. So basically, when I'm asking, when I say a further investigation, so if you look at the report, if you look at my response questions, did you get a chance to look at the response questions?
Yes,
Yes.
those are in the email. Yeah, okay.
Okay, so basically what I was saying is like none of those questions were answered. So I'm just kind of confused on how we got to this point all the way to the board if I'm just asking those particular questions in the process, why wasn't any of those questions answered? So I'm just when I say a further investigation, it's like I'm asking the board to look at it from maybe a different perspective, as we often have talked before, to have a different perspective, maybe looking at the process, looking at the history of how everything took place. If I was asking for a particular site council in September, like to me as a board member, I would question like, whoa, how come it took that long? Instead of saying, well, everything is in the report, it's saying that's in progress, and okay, let's just move on. That's the impression that I'm getting from you.
Maybe,
Yeah, let me open it up to the board.
and just, this is a little bit of a follow-on because when I read through it, I was a little bit confused about the, whether there was where's the corrective action plan? Like I was looking, okay, where is that? So I appreciate Mr. Cruz bringing up this issue and staff's review of it and acknowledgement and putting in place plans. But I was like, okay, where's the I was expecting corrective action plan with the capital C, capital A, and capital P. But my understanding, I think, is that the materials are the corrective action plan. Is that correct, or is there actually a separate? Normally, a corrective action plan actually is like some sort of
written
document
plan.
about here's what we're going to do. But it's the sum of the materials and the commitments the district has made in response to Mr. Cruz. Okay. Because that's an important, for me, it's an important point of like, what is the it that the district's committing to? So that it is the body of the materials, this is what we're going to do. And because that, to me, that wasn't necessarily clear. So the other question, and this is a little bit to Dr. Scott's point. So last spring, the policy committee like redid the site council policy. And it's very closely aligned with the law that every school needs to have a site council. And so for me, one of the questions, sort of systemic questions that comes up is, and I touched on it, it's covered, but like what is the systemic approach that PPS has to ensure that we're actually following the law? Because I mean, I know it's hard to get site council, having been on several, it's hard to get them up and running. Sometimes just, we have change in leadership. So what's our system that we ensure that really important mechanism for parent and staff engagement in the improvement work is happening?
So what we, in asking these questions, some of these very same questions, unsurfaced is that there is a benefit in creating a department that will focus solely on student learning and family engagement. And I look at Jamal Tibbs because he is now the director of that office as of just a couple months ago. Because while Mr. Tibbs had been dedicated to doing parent involvement work, we wanted to ensure that we were able to be clear, concise, and supportive with schools around what does that look like in terms of a site council that is operational, functioning, and engaging family and community. And we want to ensure that we are supporting all of our schools in that work, especially our Title I schools. So we have dedicated staff. We are rebuilding a handbook for site councils, how to stand up effective site council, and ensuring we work with general counsel to ensure that all of the language and the steps that we are laying out within that manual, if you will, for principals, aligns to state statute and state law. And we are identifying a team to go in and support schools in ensuring that that's happening, in addition to doing parent engagement and parent involvement activities for supporting schools and building those engagement activities and building a culture of engagement within their buildings.
So just appreciate that answer. So just in terms of like just the most basic compliance, there'll be somebody who can say like, hey, Hosford, do they have a functioning site council or that meets the letter of the law?
That's right.
That's great.
And working closely with Title I, Leslie Odell as well, so that there will be a checks and balance. And I think that is what I found in working with the team through this complaint, is that there is a benefit of that. Because schools do have site councils, but what I understand is that it may look different. So we're taking the case of Tubman and we are building an action plan to address Tubman. But also this is just to share that in addition, as a learning organization, we want to level forward how we can learn from this experience and ensure that we're supporting schools across the district.
PAT used to do co-trainings with the district for site councils,
Okay.
which was because I have the numbers.
So I want to keep us focused on the complaint for
Okay.
tonight. I think these are great conversations about the overall policy, but do we have additional questions about Mr. Cruz's complaint?
So I do. I want to, and maybe it's just a clarification point because you ask about, Mr. Cruz, the public records request, which seemed like a reasonable thing, and as part of what we were trying to do with the revised complaint policy was to make sure that parents got the information to continue to try and resolve things in a way that, you know, parents got the information they needed. And I was wondering, you know, why we would send somebody for a public, to submit a public records request that would be done by the time the board took action. And of course, once we take action, our policy now says you can't bring up the same, can't file a second complaint about the same event. So I don't know, do you want to share, because I think there is an answer to the information request, and I think it's, you know, it is what it is. And I think it would be in fairness to Mr. Cruz to get that information.
So I want to make sure that I'm looking at the request that was responded to. So I'm just trying to make sure that I have the right one. So this is from last Thursday. Is that what we're saying? From Thursday, September 1st? Is that right?
It's whatever PBS responded to with you'll need to file a public records request.
So I did not respond to this. So I don't know if there's someone that can speak to, I did not respond to this request.
The email came from the complaint coordinator.
So that was my question too. I wanted to know why, you know, in the spirit of collaboration, we're not just giving Mr. Cruz the information.
Well, it sounds like because,
he needed.
I mean, I'll summarize what I think the response I got late this afternoon, which is because of a leadership change, there isn't information to provide other than the PowerPoint that already was provided and the scheduling
Yeah.
invitation for the meeting.
So
Actually,
yeah.
I just wanted to make council had a comment.
Well, I think you're addressing whether the particular meeting in March occurred, which I think was part of the additional question. The other question you had regarding a public records request. I did consult with the complaint coordinator on that, and the requested documents were not relevant to the four things that are being raised here. They were an additional issue, and it wasn't clear it was an actual complaint. It was a request for documents to see these things, presuming that then that may lead to another complaint. But I would also say we should be cautious in setting up a complaint system where you're going to request a bunch of information and then essentially complain about it before you've even gotten the information, if that makes sense.
Well, my understanding was he was looking for evidence that the meeting, what's my understanding, he was looking for evidence that the meeting happened.
Which I believe he received. So am I correct?
Let's
No,
ask
no,
her.
I did not receive
Let's
that,
ask-
Scott. No, I did
Mr.
not. Don't speak for
Cruz,
me. No,
Okay, did you receive a PowerPoint from that meeting or a meeting invite?
no, I did not. So, yeah.
So I think that I will speak to sort of how we shared information. So I think that when for the meeting that was on March 10th, so the PowerPoint was shared. So there are a couple places where we've had conversations with Mr. Cruz. So we have met with him on Fridays on a regular basis. During one of the meetings on Fridays, we brought the family engagement plan. We brought the PowerPoint from the meeting.
Yeah.
That was part of that conversation and that meeting, and that it was not. We said the meeting happened at this time. That I don't know that I have to go back to my piece whether or not it was linked in that response.
Excuse me.
But that was shared, the PowerPoint.
Yeah, that's not true.
That meeting that we had that was on a Friday.
So just for clarity, I'm just
Yep.
curious. So was there a family meeting on March 10th of 2022?
We do not have a sign-in from that meeting.
So
So
was there a meeting?
I believe that there was evidence that there was a meeting. We have a PowerPoint, but I don't have a sign-in sheet.
So who would have led that meeting?
The Principal Bacon would have led it last year.
And so did you guys get confirmation from him that a meeting actually occurred?
This request was done after his position was done for the year. So what we have is the evidence from the, we have the PowerPoint that was shared at the time. But we have the PowerPoint that was stated that was shared. I don't have the meeting, I don't have a sign-in.
So we don't know if a meeting actually occurred. 'Cause I'm just curious because it's in here that, a family meeting occurred, but it seems like no one here has evidence that a meeting actually occurred.
The assistant principals were not present, so
Is it on anyone's calendar?
it's on the principal's calendar. It is on the principal's calendar, yes.
Is it on the vice principal's calendar? Because both vice principals are the same from last year.
The vice principals were not present.
Were they aware of the meeting? Because nobody was aware of the meeting. Like I have several parents that wasn't aware of the meeting, so I'm confused.
So I guess for me, in response to number 3, I guess my question is, why is 3 on here if we have no idea a meeting took place?
So I think that in the process of saying, is there information that we have some evidence that a meeting occurred. We don't have someone that was present. That is true. I was not present at the meeting. We asked if a meeting that occurred. We were provided this, information from the school that this was the information that was shared at that meeting. I do not have a sign-in sheet. So
just going from this conversation here, I can assume that there was no meeting on March 10th. But no one has any evidence of a meeting that happened on March 10th. Mr. Cruz is saying that there was no notice of a meeting to be held on March 10th. So just from this meeting here, I can say, as far as transparency, I can conclude that there was no meeting on March 10th. Because there's no evidence of a meeting on March 10th.
there's a PowerPoint. What we asked for was there information that was shared on March 10th, and that was the information that was provided. So we certainly can ask the question again and say, go back and say, is there notification? The meeting was on the principal's calendar. We can say, we can ask if there was notification that was sent out. I guess what I would say is our goal is to strive to have sign-in sheets and to have transparency and to build out these things so that it's collected in a way that is evident, and that as we move forward, this is not the standard that I think we want to maintain moving forward. So,
And this is a part of ensuring that we have some systems in place and a set of expectations shared with all principals so that they have evidence of their meetings as required. So in title, do we have all certifications that they had the required meetings? Could you speak to that?
We do not have it in the case of Harry.
But I think, what's clear from this conversation is that I think we all know that there was a breakdown at Harriet Tubman with leadership in this last year. And that I think Mr. Cruz is bringing some really important points forward about things that did not happen that needed to have happened. And I think there's a lot of lack of clarity because Principal Bacon is no longer there and it's no longer in our system, right? And so we're trying to figure stuff out. But I think for me, the question is the district's response about what is being planned going forward, that the district is aware of these issues, that we're in agreement with Mr. Cruz, that there is no site council, and that needs to be one of the number one things that happens as the new admin steps up, that Mr. Tibbs is working on those very essential community engagement pieces. We know that there were failures, that this March 10th meeting, the sign-in sheet wasn't given, and we don't have clear information. And I don't know if, in the church, the practice is you take minutes at meetings and you write down who all's there. And So to make sure that our school staff have those sort of benchmarks so that when there is a transition, when something happens, we can look back. And from my understanding, listening to staff, listening to Mr. Cruz, I don't think anyone's denying that there are real issues and there's been a failure of sort of transparency of information as this transition has happened. And for me, what I'm hearing from the district is we are aware and we're working on this, and that we agree that these things are essential and need to be dealt with.
Well, I'll push back. I'm gonna push back a little bit on that. 'Cause when you say leadership, I don't know if you're talking about the leadership that was at Tubman, or you're talking about the leadership here.
I meant the principal.
Okay.
With the principal
So-
leaving, he did things like the March 10th meeting that then weren't necessarily
Well,
communicated.
So that's I guess that's what I'm having an issue with, because you're saying there was a meeting, but nobody had evidence of a meeting. Mr. Cruz is saying that there was no meeting, that he wasn't aware of any meeting. But so for me, I think it's more of transparency and integrity, right? If we're going to say there is something, and accountability, if we're going to say that something happened and we know we're coming to a hearing, that we will get evidence of something happening. And this is part of the disengagement, from my opinion, from the district here for Tubman Middle School. Now, talking with the principal last year, talking with one of the past principals, there's always been a disengagement from the district here, from Guadalupe, from Jonathan, and this is just what I was told. From their mouth to mine, as far as disengagement that they've had at Tubman.
And when you talk to Guadalupe and other leaders at the district, what did they say about their engagement at Tubman?
That's a great question. Let's ask them.
I mean, I think that's the other side, is we're hearing from the principals what they feel about disengagement.
And I would love to hear that,
Yeah.
because from what I heard, that the only engagement that happened, most engagement that happened, was one when Mr. Bacon was asked to be principal, and there was no other really engagement from the district from there. Now, this is just one, and not only from one principal, but from a couple principals that have been at Tubman. So I think what we're talking about is the accountability piece for the things that happen. Site council stuff, this is not new about having a site council. So why there wasn't a site council doesn't make sense, because we're figuring out what we're going to do moving forward. Well, this stuff should have been done already according to the law. This stuff should already been done. So to gloss over it and just start talking about what we should be doing, we first have to understand what we did not do, so we can make sure we don't make those same mistakes moving forward. Especially when you're talking about a school like Tubman that has been historically undervalued, underengaged school. It's not just, well, what we're going to do, because plans, everybody can make great plans. That doesn't mean anything unless we put something behind the plan, some kind of accountability behind the plan, and be intentional about the plan.
And I wonder when you say underengaged, like Tubman is one of those. schools
Hold on. I don't
like
want
a
you
family
guys to,
gathering
excuse me. I don't want you guys to get into an argument of my hearing like this. Let's stick with the point. So basically what I want everybody to understand, and for it to be on record, is what I just experienced and what you just basically practice is called institutionalized racism. So basically what you did was like, you want to gloss over the experience that I just had and shared with you to move on to say, well, we're going to have a plan. But then you try to trick up my language when we're talking about dealing with March 10th, and we're talking about the accountability and the evidence of did that meeting actually take place. You want to move on and use tricky language and say, well, it wasn't a request, and then send me to a public request to get the information. So it's like that's you're using language to try to hang up my experience just to move on and gloss on to my pain and experience. Like that's literally what you're doing. And it started with Scott addressing the situations where we already have a plan. It sounds like we, like move on type of energy. It's like you got to have some type of accountability. Be honest. It's okay. We make mistakes. Be honest with the situation and be like, okay, yes, we see the mistakes. We see the issues. How can we work with you to try to solve these issues? Nobody's never even tried to reach out. I still haven't had a meeting with Guadalupe, and I've been said this is probably like my 5th complaint.
So it's like, so look at the we're human beings. Like, it's not a piece of paper. Everything is not about a piece of paper. So I have to make sure I have to use the correct language so you can see me, so you can see the issue. So I have to use the right language so you can see me. Think about that.
Mr. Cruz, I thank you for those comments. I do, because I want to make sure we're not putting words in your mouth. I want to make sure you're not putting them in ours either. My comments were not about simply just move on. It was really trying to get at the specific question about what it is you're asking the district to do right now. And I think that's important. Because I think that really is where we are. And I guess I'll go back to my colleagues on the board. Our decision tonight is to sustain the findings of these initial steps in the appeal, or to reverse them with some additional direction. And I think that that's where we are. I didn't know.
I want to say
if John-
something also too. I just want to acknowledge, Mr. Cruz, I'm hearing you loud and clear. I see what's happening also. I'm listening very carefully, and you're asking to be acknowledged in a way, like your experience to be acknowledged, and everybody in the room's like sticking to the book and the steps that are outlined, and this, A follows B, this very linear process where there's like humans in the room. So I just want to say I hear you, and I see you out here just wanting to have an honest and integrity and engagement with a high level of integrity and accountability. And so I'll take responsibility for my own role in playing along and not acknowledging your experience.
And I think I began my comments with saying that Mr. Cruz has brought out very clearly failures that have happened and problems, and that there's a huge amount of work that needs to be at Tubman, that there is no site council, that that we don't know if this meeting happened on March 10th, that there are, your work, Mr. Cruz, has brought very clearly into focus some of the failings and problems at that site. And the question to me is, we can't go back. So how do we move forward? And I think, again, the question is, I'm not clear on, the only thing I've clearly heard you say is that you want a meeting with Guadalupe, but is there, what would it look like for you to feel like you had been seen as a person, that you had been heard, and that you felt like we were being responsive?
Hey,
Ailey,
thank you though.
Karanja, this is Amy on the phone. I couldn't quite hear what you said. Were you about to say something?
No, I said I can answer her question at the end.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to add something. I'm of like mind with Director Scott, in that I'm most interested in how we move forward. And I'm also interested in making sure that we continually check back on the commitments that we've made in this process. We've had this conversation with you before, Karanja, about sort of monitoring. But I also want to just say something similar to Michelle's point, which is that you said in this process that there was no meeting, and there's no evidence of a meeting, and yet the district is coming forward and saying there was a meeting, even though we can't prove that there was a meeting. And I just want to say that I don't want to affiliate myself with that action, because I do think it is totally inappropriately invalidating. And I think, and Director Hollins, this was kind of your point too. So I just wanted to make that clear. And for my piece, I'll likely affirm the findings, but for me, it's got to have some clear action steps on how we continue to monitor and make sure that we really make good on our commitments.
Dr. Scott, I have a suggestion.
And so,
Oh, sorry, go.
I just want to also just acknowledge that for full transparency to the board, it's not reflected in here. Last week, Dr. Proctor and I did spend some time with Mr. Cruz on a number of topics, including this conversation, which again is in the spirit of listening to folks in our community, hearing their pain and the challenges that it's like to come to school here and to work here, right? And so
Yes.
I just want to acknowledge that Dr. Cruz or Mr. Cruz did meet with Dr. Proctor and I, and will continue to do so in the spirit of continuous improvement of Harriet Tubman and every school in the district.
Appreciate that.
Director Brim Edwards.
So I had a two-part suggestion. One, if the decision is to affirm that we have the memorialize better than in a series of back and forths what the corrective action plan is, so that it's a thing that's so that's one suggestion. And then I want to acknowledge that we have a new revised complaint policy that is supposed to hopefully be more parent friendly. And I know, Mr. Cruz, you received some information that in the past you wouldn't have received about this meeting, just to prepare you. I know you're a veteran of these complaint hearings, but really to try and continue to improve people's experience, because when people get to the formal complaint process, parents, it usually means there's been some breakdown somewhere in our system. So I want to acknowledge that we're always looking at how we can get better and how, as a district, we interact with parents. And I think a topic going forward, and this is Director Lowry for the policy committee or somewhere else, but one of the things that's built into the new policy is that you can't file a complaint about the same event twice. Which there's lots of reasons why that is a good thing, but if we also then put information that's out of reach of the new tightened complaint process, it means if Mr. Cruz had done a public records request and then found some information that was really relevant, it'd be too late and he couldn't file another complaint. So I think that's a place where we can maybe do better again, but I would feel most comfortable if there were, not most comfortable, it's not about comfort. I would think that instead of having a number of back and forth between the district, in which the district very clearly acknowledges that there wasn't a site council, that lays out, here's the process going forward, and I appreciate Ms. Calvert, you laying out sort of what you see as the process, but I think having that so that whether it's Mr. Cruz or other parents and staff people at Tubman, having a sense of here's what it's going to look like, and having that place be someplace where people can experience it in a way that feels real, and then you can have your parent engagement around it. So that would be a suggestion.
So we're going to be wrapping up in a second. Mr. Cruz, you said, I think you had some brief comment you wanted to make, you said at the end, maybe in response to Director Lowry's question.
Yeah, I just want some clarification first. So basically, you guys are affirming that a meeting had took place on March 10th regarding the parent involvement plan. And you guys are affirming that the CIP document was created and is going to be shared at the next council meeting. And you guys are affirming the corrective action plan, even though it's not a written plan. So I just wanted to be clear on that.
I think what I heard Director Constam say and others around this table is that we can't affirm that the March 10th meeting happened because we do not have that evidence. So I think that would be one that in the response that you received, that we would acknowledge that there is no evidence that we have the PowerPoint and that's it. So we can't with clarity say that meeting took place. We have to rely on the proof we have, which isn't sufficient at this point.
Well, Director Amy had said she was voting to affirm. So I'm confused. Are all of them lumped together, 1 through 4? Or do you affirm 1? Do you not affirm 2? I'm just trying to understand the process.
Yeah, so we haven't voted yet. So yeah, generally speaking, we can do any of those things. We could affirm the entire thing in total, or we could take separate actions on each one. I'm actually going to make a suggestion. And I'd like to hear a little bit from where my colleagues are, because we've talked a lot, but only Director Constam has sort of said, where she is. I am interested. from my perspective, and again, I think these issues are really important. I also have seen a commitment both in the time spent meeting with you and the time spent discussing these issues and the time spent here, a commitment by the district to continuous improvement plan at Harriet Tubman Middle School. I am comfortable affirming the findings with the exception of number 3. My suggestion would be that we affirm the findings and reverse the finding of number 3 that there was a meeting. Ask the district to go back and do some additional evidence gathering there. There should be electronic records of whether a meeting invite went out, other things that we can do. Because I think what I'm hearing from you, Mr. Cruz, is that's an important factual point. I don't know how important that is moving forward in the sense of the plan in place, but I do hear from this perspective of, it's an important point whether it happened. And I think getting back to Director Holland's point, there's an issue there of accountability of just whether it happened or not. That would be my take, but I would open it up to my colleagues to see their thoughts.
And that's one sentence in a 3-paragraph response.
Correct. So
Section
affirming
3,
the
but-
findings here with the exception of that
That,
and just
mhm.
asking the district to do a little more digging.
And yeah, I agree with that also. And just want to say that the fact that we don't have the evidence is just highlighting, that where we need to put controls in place. And so it's a great place to start to make an improvement, I think. So I would be in favor of affirming with the exception of number 3 as well.
I'll be in favor of affirming if there is some sort of memorialization of the corrective action plan, because it appears that reading it, that there is one.
So pulling the
An
district
artifact.
together.
Yeah, thank you.
I think we can include that.
Memorialized or artifact of, I mean, I believe the commitment of what was said about the process, but it, like I say, you'd have to read through a lot of different things to actually.
So Chair, if I may, so I would expect, and it would be an objective, that every school in PPS has a functional school site council, that it's elected and is a representational cross-section of the school community, that part of its key duties, rights, and responsibilities is to act in governance and collaboration with the school principal. That they have, for example, that they review the SCIP, the school continuous improvement plan, that they're working with central supports and devising that and doing regular data reviews as a school site council. That if they're a Title I school identified school, that they have their required parent involvement policy, that they have the student parent contact compact. These are not new things, and this is one of those issues in the last year or two in some of our schools, particularly those that were challenged, where these weren't strictly managed, and with a lot of other challenges, didn't raise as a priority. If it would give the board assurance in our communities, I don't think it would be too difficult of a task to say, for this fall, this is the timeline for every one of our schools and how we'll manage, supervise, and support these tasks getting done, because we do want to be in compliance with the law, particularly around our Title I requirements, and not jeopardize the resources that we get to support students in targeted ways there. But for schools in particular like Harriet Tubman, with new leadership that we have confidence in, that this will just be an exercise that is not just the launch of a council, but actually engages in the functional, ongoing, meaningful conversations in all things related to the improvement of the school.
And we'll create an artifact, if that's what the board would like, to demonstrate just that. I've shared that we've already created a department, we've already hired a director for the department, and that is the sole charge of the department in collaboration with Leslie Odell from Title I. But we would be more than happy to create an artifact if that's what is requested of us. Just as Superintendent Guerrero has said, that is our commitment. Because this complaint is specific to Harriet Tubman Middle School, we will also add and memorialize our commitment and timeline of how soon we will have a site council in place at Harriet Tubman, and how soon we will have our first meeting with the site council. And provide and how we will move forward specifically with ensuring that we have the necessary artifacts of each meeting moving forward as well.
Okay. See if I can capture
Yeah,
this.
I just want to make a quick comment before it slips my mind. And, I know we probably only got about 5 more minutes. I know you guys got other business, but basically, again, I have to kind of like deal with the emotional aspect of it because I'm actually experiencing the racism. I'm experiencing the trauma. I'm experiencing everything basically that you kind of like you read about or you study about. However, you guys are voting on to affirm something to move on, but it's clear, none of these things are in place, even number 2, and even number 4. So what I'm asking, maybe is for me to kind of feel seen, and maybe for Harriet Tubman to be seen, is instead of maybe we need Jonathan and Guadalupe. Maybe I need to meet with them. Maybe we need to see them more. Maybe we need to see them at the school more. Maybe we need to see them at our PTSA meetings more often. I think that would bring a different type of precedence. It would bring a different type of message. Even to me personally, because I just feel like, these concerns are continue to be ignored. And then when I bring up the concerns and raise the issues, and then all of a sudden there's an action plan that takes place. So I don't know. So that's the answer to your question. I'm asking you to not affirm, to reverse the findings so we can continue to have the conversation so we can really put these things in place. That would make me feel more heard.
Thank you, Mr. Cruz. I'm going to see if I could capture asking for if we have a motion. And I guess I want to, we need to move forward and wrap this up. I do hear what you're saying, and I guess I will just say that my expectation coming out of tonight is not that we are affirming and reversing in part, but it's not taking action in order to move on and ignore what happened. It's actually taking action in order to put corrective action plans in place. And I think what we have now is a documented evidence and record based on your complaint, based on this process, that we as a board can hold the district accountable for making sure we're following through on. And so I think for me, that's the positive coming out of this, and why I'm going to take the vote I'm going to take. I can't speak for any of my colleagues. Do I have a motion to affirm in part the portions of this complaint, with the exception of reversing the finding that a meeting was held on March 10th and asking the district to do a little bit more gathering of evidence about that meeting, and also to memorialize the corrective action plan, and also create artifacts based on the evidence, based on the actions that have been taken to date? I think I've captured the motion. I'm asking if we have that motion.
I have one comment on that. When you say, if we affirm so we can kind of move on. If we don't affirm, that does not stop us from putting the things in place.
No.
Right.
And
So I'm saying that I don't think we have to affirm just to get moving forward. We can not affirm and things still should be moving in that direction. I think the not affirming would be the statement saying, there's a lot more work to do. There's a lot more things we need to see, beforehand. So I don't think we have to affirm just to move forward. We cannot affirm and we still could be moving forward.
And yes, absolutely, that's true. My challenge about not affirming is, again, in our policy, it's very clear if the board does not affirm, we need to send very clear direction to staff in terms of new different actions to take. And when I read through what the district is doing, it just felt to me like they're taking the actions that we as a board would want them to take in the situation. So I guess what I would say is and by all means, if there's a desire and a majority of this board that doesn't want to affirm, we can put that motion on the table too. But I think that motion will have to be accompanied by very specific direction. And I can't see how that direction will be different than what we've received.
Or more specific than what's already on the table.
So
What gives you that evidence that's
Mr. Cruz, I'm sorry, we do need to have the board discussion and wrap this up. So if you could give us a second.
So I'm just when we talk about if we not affirm and give more direction, I guess when I'm looking at direction and I'm looking for accountability pieces, right? Is there an outcome from the processes that we're actually looking for? Is there a timeline on this as well, right? So, not affirming, I think, and I don't know if we have to give directions today if we don't affirm, or can we give directions, next week, or however that works. I don't know what that process is, but I would like to see some timelines with that. Is we going to have a site council ready to go in 3 weeks, in 4 weeks? Have a deadline to do stuff. Is some of these reporting things going to be reported out in a timely fashion? When we talk about the school continuous improvement plan, is it accessible to parents? Is it accessible to the community to actually look out and reach out and grab it and see what that is for their school? So if all those things are done, then I can see, okay, let's affirm, let's move forward. But if not, I think the not affirming piece will get us to maybe look a little bit more in depth and dive into a little bit more to get to the accountability piece of the complaint or of the decision, I guess.
And to that point, there is a provision in the policy that, you're correct, there's 2 actions, but the third is with agreement from the complainant, the board may hold the complaint in abeyance until a certain date or event.
And I was gonna offer, that that's important information that what I was gonna offer in addition to the action steps, that we have laid out to create and present, the corrective action plan, and a timeline. In addition, what I heard said earlier, and just confirmed, is that because we were able to hire new leadership at Harriet Tubman, and that there is the first parent meeting happening next week, that we have a tighter timeline by which we could potentially have the site council up and have the first site council meeting occur, which would allow staff to provide the board with a comprehensive update of not just the corrective action plan and timeline, but also a first parent meeting and the first site council meeting with associated, with related artifacts. And we could give that update with all of those materials by October 15th.
So I think that's great, because then now we can, if we choose not to affirm, we can put that, with just what she said in writing, get it down, so we can have not only a plan of action and things, but the accountability piece as well, right? So I appreciate that, and I think, like I said, with not affirming, we can put that in here.
Why couldn't we, or can we both affirm and put those additional pieces in place? The
And I
timeline?
guarantee these things are gonna
So
happen.
I think I want to acknowledge, Director Hollins, what you're getting at, which is not just talking about a plan, but actually calendaring plan and outlining, having that accountability piece. So I'm wondering if we can both affirm and add that additional language that puts that accountability in place with
So I think
dates on the
this is-
calendar.
Yes, to your point.
Can
I
we-
think this was what I was trying to offer in my one comment is, this is where the inadequacy of the complaint process. We all agree the school
Yeah.
needs a highly functioning school site council that's communicating with the school community. And so what I offered is that we would take steps, that we would share a timeline, that you would see those artifacts. I don't keep track of the minutes for every school, but we'll make sure that they exist, because we have supervisors who are over at that school all the time. So we will proceeding this meeting, share with you what the action plan is, not just for Tubman, but how we're going to manage that to make sure all of our schools have school site council, school improvement plans that have been looked at, PIPs, parent-family requirements that are Title I requirements, all the things that I mentioned earlier, that we have those. It won't be in December. You'll have a tight timeline that'll happen in this first month or two.
So I would like to suggest we hold the complaint in abeyance until we have that October 15th, because I'm hearing from my board colleagues some tension around this. We've already talked about the step 3 and maybe deleting that portion about the meeting because we don't have evidence of it. And then, I think what I heard Mr. Cruz say is really wanting to be seen. So I think if we have those pieces in place, we can kind of hold all those strands together to feel a better sense of resolution about this complaint. So that'd
come
be
back
my
and have the
suggestion is we
conversation.
come back,
Just put it in abeyance.
put it in abeyance until we have that.
So I'm seeing some nods, but I want to go back because Mr. Cruz, part of our complaint policy is that you would need to agree to hold this in abeyance. So I want to make sure, one, that you've heard the conversation and if you have any clarifying questions, and then your thoughts.
Yeah, I agree.
Do we need to take a vote to hold in abeyance, or is that just,
It says the board shall issue a final decision after the hearing that the district's step one decision is, and then it's 1 or 2, and the 2 with agreement from the complainant, the board may hold the complaint in abeyance. So it's the board may hold. It seems like that require a vote, an affirmation that we agree with the complainant.
That we want to
Okay.
hold it in advance.
so I'm seeing some nods, so I'm going to
Yes.
I'm going to ask for a motion to hold this in abeyance until after these artifacts timelines have been created. We'll come back then after that point to be scheduled to find out. So moved.
Second.
Second.
Okay, Director Lowry moves, and a couple seconds,
Everybody's-
Director Hollins and Director Brim Edwards.
Michelle?
All in favor of the motion, say yes.
Aye.
Yes.
Aye.
Yes.
All opposed, please say no.
Yes.
Got a yes from Amy. Okay, the board has voted to hold in abeyance this complaint by a vote of 6-0, and we will find a future date. Mr. Cruz, thank you for joining us today and for your comments. Staff, thank you for all of the work going into this and also the work going forward at Tubman. We're excited to see the results of that. Board, we are at 6:05. We are adjourned. We're at 6:05, so we've gone through our dinner break, so 5 minutes, and I'd like to start downstairs. So